And so what we're looking at now is we're looking at this huge sea change of all sorts of reforms and all sorts of improvements. And it has people very, very skittish.
It's pretty clear we're going to hit another cliff.
We are actually in a vortex of recessionary forces where social and economic conditions of kids really matter, and matter more now than before.
So this is actually the most exciting time I think we've seen for decades in terms of education policy.
Well, we have to, number one, because we're behind. And we live in a global economy, so we don't really have any choice. I also want to say that the Common Core state standards, where states are now coming together, means that they can put their energies together, and there can be a lot of efficiencies in education. So it's a perfect time for the states to come together to do that.
And education is going to really be a driver, a big component of our economy, whether or not we're going to be able to create the human capital that we need to fill the high skills jobs that are going to be the only jobs available soon.
So we are forced to do everything at the same time, and that's why the federal government has to step in to help states with stimulus funding to make sure that we backstop and avert draconian budget cuts, because we will not be able to do reform if we don't also ensure that there's equity in schools, particularly for the kids who have always felt fallen behind.
I think we are in the midst of a wave of education reform, and it's beginning to happen in teacher contracts, at the district level, at the state level, and at the federal level. We're certainly seeing it coming out of Washington, but I believe that the Washington money is short-term money, and the issues that it needs to begin to resolve, though the intentions may be very good, are much longer term than the money will last.
Now is not the time to say, let's try something new. Now is the time to get in there and really say, okay, we know based on research here, here, and here that this works. So let's really take this money and invest in doing this at scale, doing what we know works in key districts, what we know has worked in key states, and doing it across the country. And then the second thing is making sure that whatever reforms we're putting in place are reforms that are felt in the classroom. So if we're going to invest in things like data systems and data collection, how are we doing it in such a way that the teachers see it, that the teachers feel it, that the teachers know they can get all of this information from the federal government or from the states and put it to use to improve their classroom? When we're looking at issues even like teacher quality, that it's more than simply how are we giving extra money to teachers, but that we are using, as we identify those teachers that get incentives, how are we using that to improve the quality of teaching across the board? I think if we can look at those two things and we can say what works and that we can do at scale, and what works that we know is going to impact the classroom, that's where we're going to see the greatest opportunity to reform.
What you have now that you didn't have 2 years ago are a number of states and a number of districts that are really undertaking comprehensive changes in how teachers are evaluated, how they're compensated, how they're hired, how they're promoted, how they're paid, etc. And so I think we're going to make a lot of mistakes, and there's going to need to be some mid-course corrections in a lot of places, but we're going to learn a lot, and I think what we're going to do is really change the approach to teacher effectiveness in a very real way. I mean, the conversation has shifted as a result of all these factors I talked about in a way that I think is irrevocable. I don't think we're going back to the same old lines of battle and the same old ideological stumbling blocks that existed. I think things have really changed. Now the big risk is the execution won't be good, and that's the real risk. We could look back 3 and 5 years from now and say there were a lot of ambitious attempts, they weren't implemented well, and as a result everybody moved on and said, well, that was that era when we worried about teacher effectiveness. Now we're on to curriculum or class size or some other thing. So it's all about execution now.